Hey guys, today I'm going to show you my favorite secret weapon within Lightroom. The one tool that can take your images from good to whoa. You want some whoa? Let's get it. Hello again everybody, welcome back to Rusty Brown Photography. I am Rusty Brown. Thanks for being here today. Today I'm going to get into a bit of a tutorial, a little tip if you will. I'm going to show you the one tip in Lightroom that I use to really take my images to the next level during the editing process. It's, as you know, Lightroom is an amazing tool and you can do a lot with it. But if you start to break down the different components and the different segments within it, you may find something that gives you some wow or some whoa factor as well. So let's get into that. Before we do, quick Lightroom story, true story. I think it was 2012, definitely no later than 2013. I was having a conversation with Marcus, young Sergeant Johnson. That's Dee's boy. That's my wife's son. Marcus is a photographer, and he's been at it for a long time. Marcus is one of those guys that just has he's got an incredible eye for composition. He always has. Anything that I do well now in composition comes from years of study and practice. Marcus always had the ability to see something and capture it. So one time he was home on leave. Again, I think it was 2012, and we were just talking about photography. And he's like, "Hey, so what do you think about Lightroom?" I'm like, "I don't use that. What is it?" And he's like, "Well, you should be using that." And I'm thinking, "Why?" And he said, "Well, you want to take your raw images and break them down." And I was like, "I don't shoot raw." He's like, "What?" And I was like, "No, at that time I'm shooting all JPEGs. I was thinking about." The smaller the file, the better, easy. And he's like, "No, you should be shooting raw." We go back and forth, and he's showing me all these images, and I'm pointing out, I'm like, "But look at the size of those images, man. Those things are huge." And he said, "Yes, but you want that when you get into the edit." I had no idea what he was talking about. So as we go back and forth, he said, "Okay, so how are you cataloging?" I'm like, "What are you saying?" He said, "Okay, you shoot JPEG. How do you track what you shoot and where it is?" I said, "Well, I take it off the card, I move it over to here, I throw it into the My Pictures thing." And he's like, "Stop. You're going to have a serious problem if you do it that way. At a minimum, use Lightroom to catalog your workflow." Now he had my attention because my stuff was kind of scattered, real talk, right? So ultimately, I took his advice, and he told me to do the trial version of Lightroom. Back then it was Lightroom 4. I used it to start cataloging, and before you know it, I started wanting to do some adjustments with images, and I found that with JPEGs, that window of adjustment was extremely small. Fast forward a little bit further, I only shoot raw now, and I'm lost without Lightroom. So before I get into what this tip is, I wanted to make sure that I told you guys how I got here, and more importantly, thank you, Marcus. I appreciate that. That was a huge solid, and next time you're in town, the drinks are on me, because had it not been for that conversation, I don't know what my cataloging or my editing would be like. All right. So with that, let's jump into Lightroom. I'm going to show you this tool real quick and let me know what you think about it. A couple of things you should see right off the bat. If you're familiar with Histogram, and you should be in Lightroom, look at the upper right side. This tells you most things about your image. So when you look at a histogram, basically from left to right, it is dark to light. It's that simple. When you see peaks over on the left side, your image is going to be dark. You really want some balance in here. And as you can see with this particular shot, I didn't have balance. Now, here's the story. If you look, you can see the catch light in Priscilla's eyes. So the flash went off, but it didn't go off at full power. So instead of stop shooting, I continued to move through the shoot. This is one of the reasons why you don't want to delete your images in camera, because in the viewfinder it would look like, nah, this isn't a keeper. But with Lightroom, you can restore an image and say, wow, it really did come out pretty good. See, everything is centered here in the middle, right? And now you see the triangle at the top that's saying, hey, this thing is too dark. And if you hover your mouse over it, you'll see some blue light show up in her hair, right? That's just saying that this thing is peaking way on the dark side. Now, Traditionally, you would use these sliders to adjust your image. First and foremost, I would say, okay, let's bump up the exposure a bit. Now you notice in the histogram, things have moved a little bit more to the right. We're getting a little balance. Next up, you probably want to take your shadow slider. You say, okay, we're at plus 50 on that. Now, when you look at the histogram, it's a little more balanced. You may not have known from the original image that Priscilla's hair was red, and now you can see that it's red. But what I want to do is I want to use the secret weapon to bring out the red in her hair and to make it super sharp. I believe that if you do this, you can separate the hair from the rest of the image. My personal favorite secret weapon is right here. And if you hover over it, you see it says the adjustment brush. What the adjustment brush does is let you pinpoint where you want to make a particular edit. If you use the sliders, no matter what you do, whether it's shadows, clarity, contrast, it's impacting the entire image. What the adjustment brush does is let you decide what adjustment you want to make and where. You select the adjustment brush tool and you get a different drop down panel. Now what I want to do is I want to get inside the layers of hair because it's really thick. So what I like to do first is go over to shadows, and I'll take a number like 25 just to start. Now you want to make sure when you're looking down the right side of this column with the adjustment brush on that no other edit functions are selected. Only the one you want to do. For me first, it's shadows. So we've selected 25 on the shadows, and now all I'm going to do is start going over her hair like this. Now I'm going to speed some of this up for the sake of the edit. That's step one. Now you hit done. I come back again, select the adjustment brush, zero out what you just did. We're done with shadows. Next thing you want to do is a little bit of saturation. So let's say we want to make the red a bit redder. I'll come up and I'll just say, let's go with a value of 20. And now I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to just brush over the hair only on saturation. The next stop that I want to do, again, adjustment brush, clear out what we just had, zero on saturation. I want to go to clarity and sharpen it up. For me, we'll start with 25. And you got it. Again, pick start anywhere, and we're going to just start going over her hair. Now with clarity. Now take a look at the histogram, and you see the difference that this made. If you want to see what it looks like now, this was our original. This was the change that we made. Very quick. Look at the histogram. And now the edited version. Look at the histogram here. Notice how it isn't dark at the top on the left, nor is it peaking at the right. It's peaking pretty close to the middle, and it changes the entire outlook of the image with Priscilla. And there you have the side by side. You can look at this histogram and you can see here is the image on the left. When I click on the right side, it's the image on the right. You really get an idea of how this tool can help you. You have sliders in Lightroom, and there are going to be some instances where you have to apply an adjustment to the entire image. But there's other times when you have to get into an area. It could be fabric, it could be clothing. I didn't do anything with the lipstick. You know, you can do a lot with the adjustment brush. There may only be one thing that you want to do. You can adjust the exposure of the image in the area that you want. So if you took a shot and one side had too much light on it than the other, you wouldn't want to do an overall exposure adjustment to the image. You just hit the adjustment brush, bump up the exposure on one side, or take down the exposure on the side that was where the highlights are too great. I'm all about what's called a non-destructive edit. I'm not putting something in or taking something away. I'm trying to accentuate something that's already there. And as was the case with Priscilla's hair, it was thick. But if you can get in there and get the colors out, I think it makes the image pop, and that's what gives you the wow factor. And again, whether you have an underexposed image that you have to bring up to the proper exposure, or whether you have a properly exposed image that still needs some detailed work, I think the adjustment brush tool in Lightroom is the way to go. This was my first ever Lightroom book, Lightroom 4. You may be like, why do you have this? Because since talking to Marcus, I've been to a couple of classes taught by Scott Kelby of Adobe. Scott is an amazing Lightroom and Photoshop guy. And long story short, I now have my Lightroom certification. But the reason that I kept this one, not just because it was my first, but because, I don't know if you can see that, but Scott autographed it for me. So I like to keep Lightroom 4 around. By the way, I think we're on version 10 now, just to give you an idea of how much this particular application has changed. Coming up in a couple of weeks, I'm going to put out the video that shows my entire edit flow step by step. It's going to be my first ever reference video. So what I did today was very quick, just to show you the benefits of that tool, but you'll see me use it in greater detail in the reference video. So I'm going to show you how I edit an image step by step between Lightroom, Photoshop, back to Lightroom, and using frequency separation. So keep an eye out for that one, because that one's going to really get down into the weeds for those of you that want to get there. I'm going to show you one other thing. Like we talked about the cataloging, right? On this particular desktop machine, I've got 3 external drives, one 5 terabyte and 2 8 terabytes. Just on this system, I have 53,500 images. So thanks again, Marcus, because again, I would be lost without this cataloging mechanism. And again, that's only the 3 drives that I have here. If you're using Lightroom, let me know. How do you like it? Do you catalog? I'm assuming that you shoot RAW. If you don't, why not? I do know some people that shoot both RAW and JPEG. If you're not using Adobe, if you're not part of the Adobe ecosystem, you're not using Lightroom. What are you using? Because I know there's a lot of other things out there that don't use this subscription model, and I'm always interested in those. So that's it, guys. That's how I use the adjustment brush. That's why I think it's such a winner of a tool. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. It helps me continue to put out good content for the channel. I really enjoy doing this. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm probably learning more than I thought I would, and that's a big plus for me because of the interactions that I have with those of you guys out there. So keep those coming. I look forward to bringing you the next video. Until then, take care.